What are sanborn maps? How far back do they go? What does F mean on the maps? Are they still made? Are they in the public domain? I'll answer all of these questions and more in this video. If you're new here, I'm Jamelyn and I love sanborn maps. I actually love all things old and historical, but sanborn maps are what I talk about on this channel. So first question, what are sanborn maps? Sanborn maps is the common term used to describe the fire insurance maps provided by the Sanborn Map Company out of New York City. Daniel Alfred Sanborn was a civil engineer and surveyor from Somerville, Massachusetts. In 1866, D.A. Sanborn was hired by the Aetna Insurance Company to map cities in Tennessee. A year later, he created an incredibly detailed map of Boston. This map was so well received by the insurance company, and there was such a need for fire insurance maps that he decided to start his own company. He founded his publishing company, the D.A. Sanborn National Insurance Diagram Bureau, in New York City in 1867. This company specialized in city maps that would be used by fire insurance industry. After D.A. Sanborn's death in 1883, his company acquired the map firm of Paris and Brown, which traces its origins to 1852. Eventually, Sanborn's company was renamed to the Sanborn Map and Publishing Company, which then became the Sanborn Paris Map Company Limited. In 1902, the name was shortened to the Sanborn Map Company, which is the name the company uses today. So next question, what exactly is a fire insurance map? In short, these maps are maps of cities that are coded to show details of how risky a building is as it relates to fires. To fully answer this question, however, I want to take us back in time to the beginning of the story, which I find quite interesting. Toward the end of the 18th century, London was having problems with destructive fires in this very crowded city. Most notably, the Ratcliffe Fire of 1794 destroyed over 450 buildings and left 1,400 people homeless. This fire started when an unattended kettle of pitch, which is a thick, tar-like material used for waterproofing or roofing, it was knocked over on a barge. This ignited another nearby barge that was loaded with gunpowder materials, causing a ridiculously large explosion. At the time, this was London's worst fire between the Great Fire of 1666 and the Blitz of World War II. There were several factors that made fighting fires so difficult in London at the time, including its narrow streets, flammable warehouses and residential areas, water supply issues, and a poorly organized fire department system. The insurance companies needed a way to understand the risk associated with providing coverage to buildings, but did not have the resources to send an agent to every single building to assess its overall fire risk. They needed details on things like the building's proximity to a warehouse that manufactured flammable materials, or if there was a fire hydrant on the street, or if the building was made of fireproof brick or something flammable like wood. These maps would even indicate a city's prevailing wind direction because that has an impact on which way the fire will travel. As a result, a new industry emerged with cartographers specializing in maps that detailed all of this information and was sold to insurance companies. Eventually, these maps made their way to the United States. The first known fire insurance map of a U.S. city was of Charleston, South Carolina, and was published in 1790. The major fire insurance company that was providing maps for American cities was the Phoenix Assurance Company out of London, England. This eventually became a bit problematic, though, when war was declared between Great Britain and the U.S. in 1812. However, this left an opening for another company to take over the fire insurance maps in America. Around 1850, George Hope with the Jefferson Insurance Company in New York City picked up the mantle for fire insurance maps in the U.S. Several surveyors, publishers, and insurance companies followed his lead. Eventually, D.A. Sanborn's company bought out the smaller companies, and his maps became the gold standard for fire insurance maps used by insurance companies. Next question, what is the purpose of Sanborn maps? They are ultimately a tool for fire insurance companies to assess the risk associated with providing coverage for a building as it relates to fire. So for example, let's say there's a restaurant owner who's wanting to get insurance for his building in case something happens, like a grease fire starts in the kitchen and burns the building down. Fires in restaurants can happen, and he wants to make sure he's got a safety net in place just in case. So this restaurant owner contacts an insurance agent and says he wants to get coverage. And the agent's like, okay, sure, sounds good. Let me check the Sanborn map to look up the building's address. The agent sees this building is located in a congested part of the city on a relatively narrow street and next door to a fireworks factory. So he's going to charge the restaurant owner a higher rate since there's an increased risk of fire for this building. In the same city, there's a homeowner who's also looking to get some insurance. This homeowner contacts the insurance agent who does the same process by looking at the Sanborn map. In this case, the agent sees the home is built of brick with a clay roof. It's located in the middle of a large lot on a fairly wide street. It's got a fire hydrant 2 houses down. So he gives this customer a much lower rate since there's a reduced risk of this building catching fire, or if it were to catch fire, it has a reduced risk of spreading the fire to nearby buildings. These Sanborn maps allowed insurance agents who were unable to actually go and see in person each building a more objective idea of the fire risk of that building. Agents could not go visually inspect every single building, either because there were just too many buildings needing coverage or because the agent was working at an agency in another town. So Sanborn maps provided them an objective view of the property. All right, moving along to the next question. How far back do Sanborn maps go? We already discussed the overall history of fire insurance maps in general, but for Sanborn maps, the oldest one dates back to 1867 and is of Boston. The majority of Sanborn maps were made in the 1880s through the 1920s. These are the ones that I feature most on this channel and I offer as reprints in my shop, but we'll get to that a bit later when we talk about copyrights related to these maps. How often were Sanborn maps updated? In general, Sanborn maps were done roughly once a decade depending on the city size. Some cities, however, would get updates every 3 to 5 years. It really just depended on the city size, its growth rate, and its relative risk level as it related to fires. This was because the Sanborn maps were so expensive to make. You had the employees who would go and physically walk the areas and take detailed notes. With those notes, the maps would be drawn and colored in by other employees. It was a labor-intensive and time-consuming task to make Sanborn maps of most of the cities in America. In order to make the best use of resources, some maps would have corrections made to previously published maps. This is where the surveyor would add or modify something on the previously published map and sign a date, a correction table on the index map indicating a change had been made. So when an update like new buildings in the downtown area were built or a new neighborhood was developed, these would manually be added with literal cutting and pasting over the top of a copy of the previously published paper map. Getting more into the nitty-gritty of these maps, what does the F mean on the Sanborn maps? So let's get interactive here and take a quick quiz. What do you think it means? Does the letter F mean A for furnace, B for fire, C for flat, or D for frog pond? If you guess C, you're right. The F on a Sanborn map stands for flat. This is probably a leftover term from when the fire insurance maps were being drawn by the British, since we don't really use that term in America and instead just say apartment. Other terms commonly found on Sanborn maps were D or DWG for dwelling, aka a home, S for store, SAL for saloon, VAC for vacant, PO for post office, WHO for warehouse, DG for dry goods, and general S for general store. There are many other abbreviations found in Sanborn maps, but they are generally straightforward and easy to figure out the meaning. If you find a weird abbreviation in a Sanborn map, drop it in the comments below. I like to see weird things in these maps. All right, so next question. Are Sanborn maps still made? The answer to this question is both yes and no. So yes, the Sanborn Map Company does still exist, but they no longer make fire insurance maps. Publishing of Sanborn maps really slowed down after World War II. There's a lot of reasons for this, but I would suggest the biggest reason is that insurance companies found more efficient methods for assessing risk and no longer needed all of those paper maps. These maps became even more expensive to keep updated after the war when there were so many new homes being built across the nation. In 1962, the National Bureau of Fire Underwriters Maps Committee reported they did not view the need for residential fire maps as essential to the industry anymore. Today, Sanborn makes maps for municipal customers who use these maps for engineering and architectural planning. So this next question is a common one. Are Sanborn maps in the public domain? The short answer is yes. Many Sanborn fire insurance maps are in the U.S. public domain, but not all. In practice, everything published in 1929 or earlier is public domain. Maps issued between 1930 and 1963 may or may not be in the public domain depending on whether their copyrights were renewed. And then maps published in 1964 and later are still under copyright. According to the Library of Congress website, any Sanborn map that they have available on their website has been checked for copyright restrictions and has been cleared to be in the public domain. This means that anyone can download, print, or use the maps in any way without requiring permission. I have a shop where I sell high-resolution reprints of these Sanborn maps, and I make sure that all of my maps that I sell are from 1929 or earlier to ensure I'm not breaking any copyright laws. So this leads us to our last question. Where can you find Sanborn maps? The best place to get Sanborn maps online is at the Library of Congress. Their website is loc.gov. As I just mentioned, if you find a Sanborn map on this website, it's been checked for copyright restrictions and it's free and clear for you to use. Some state universities also have websites that contain Sanborn maps. Depending on which university you check, some of these maps are in the public domain and some might still have copyright restrictions. In addition, some university websites require a login, so you need to be a student or faculty of the institution in order to get access to those Sanborn maps. This is why I recommend going to the LOC website for your Sanborn maps if you plan on using these images for anything. I hope I answered your questions and that you're walking away with a better appreciation for these awesome documents. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other Sanborn map related questions, and I can include them in a next video. Now, for those of you who love Sanborn maps and will love your own copy, but either don't have the technical expertise to have them printed on a high quality medium, or you don't have the time and just want someone else to do it for you, then you're in the right place. I have a shop where I sell reprints of Sanborn maps. I offer several sizes of canvas wraps and frame prints. I have a set of 3 of these maps hanging on my wall in my home. They're 20 by 24 inch canvas wraps, which is nearly identical to the size of the original Sanborn maps, which was 21 by 25 inches. I find this size is perfect for seeing all of the details of the maps as they were meant to be viewed. I also love how these maps have the original markings on them, like the stamps from the Library of Congress and pin marks, and in some instances, even fingerprints. They are also unique, and I love that there's a story behind the art. If you found this video interesting or learned something new, I would love for you to like it and subscribe to my channel. I film videos about general information on Sanborn maps, like this one, but most of my videos are actually about the cities featured in these maps. I really enjoy researching for those videos, and I hope that my map-loving friends enjoy our travels through the maps together. I appreciate you joining me for this Q&A about Sanborn maps. As always, thanks for stopping by.